The address was 1487 Willow Creek Road, Ohio, USA. The house stood at the very edge of a quiet, almost forgotten town in Ohio, right where the road seemed to end and silence took over. During the day, it looked old but harmless, just another aging wooden house with cracked porch boards, dusty windows, and a dead tree leaning near the front yard. But at night, it became something else entirely. The darkness around it felt heavier than normal, and even the wind seemed to avoid it. Locals said someone was still living inside that house, but according to them, it wasn't human. In October of 2021, a man named Daniel Morris moved into the house. He was 32, divorced, living alone, and working remotely. He wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere far from the noise of the city, and the rent was cheap enough that he didn't ask too many questions. The landlord only gave him one warning before handing over the keys. Don't go upstairs after 1 a.m. Daniel laughed it off. He assumed it was just another small-town ghost story meant to scare outsiders. He was wrong. The first night passed without incident, but on the second night, at exactly 1:13 a.m., Daniel suddenly woke up to the sound of slow footsteps above him. Not creaking wood, not settling pipes. Footsteps. Bare feet softly tapping across the old wooden floor of stairs. At first, he told himself it was just the house making noise, but then the footsteps came again, this time moving slowly from the far end of the upstairs hallway toward the staircase. It sounded deliberate, like someone was walking very carefully, or trying to be heard. Then he heard something worse. A door upstairs slowly creaked open, and right after that, for just a second, he heard the faint sound of a little girl laughing. Then everything went silent. The next morning, Daniel checked the entire house. Every door was locked, every window was shut, but when he went upstairs, he froze. In the dust covering the hallway floor were small wet footprints, the footprints of a child. They started at the far end of the hallway and led toward the stairs. The problem was, they came from a room that was still locked. That afternoon, Daniel spoke to his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Helen, who had lived on that road for decades. At first, she didn't want to say much, but eventually she gave in. She told him that in 1998, a family had lived in that same house, a husband, a wife, and their 8-year-old daughter, Emily. According to Helen, Emily used to tell people that a lady lived in the upstairs room. Her parents dismissed it as an imaginary friend, but Emily kept insisting that the woman was real. She said, "She watches me while I sleep." A week later, Emily vanished without a trace. No sign of forced entry, no body, no explanation. The only thing everyone remembered was that in the nights leading up to her disappearance, the family had all reported hearing the same thing at 1:13 a.m., bare footsteps walking upstairs. That night, Daniel decided to record whatever was happening. He set his phone to record audio before going to sleep. At exactly 1:13 a.m., the footsteps returned. This time they were much closer, so close that it sounded like someone was standing directly outside his bedroom door. His chest tightened as he slowly leaned down and looked at the narrow gap beneath the door. On the other side, he saw 2 small pale feet standing perfectly still in the hallway. They didn't move, they didn't shift, they just stood there as if a child had been waiting for him to notice. Daniel panicked and turned on the light. The feet were gone instantly. The next morning, he played back the recording. At first, there was only static, then the sound of the footsteps, but after that came something he had not heard with his own ears that night, a faint little girl's voice whispering, "Don't let her in." Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. Something had spoken outside his door while he slept, and it had only been captured by the recorder. By then, Daniel couldn't ignore the locked room upstairs anymore. He grabbed a screwdriver and hammer and forced the door open. The room was small, freezing cold, and smelled stale and rotten. The wallpaper was faded and peeling. A broken rocking chair sat in the corner. In the middle of the room was a tiny wooden bed, and on top of it lay a torn, filthy doll. But what really made him stop was the writing on the walls. Scratched over and over again into the wallpaper and wood were the same words: "She is not my mother." Dozens of times, maybe more. It looked like someone had carved the message with their nails in pure panic. Under the bed, Daniel found an old cassette recorder. He managed to find the way to play it, and what he heard turned his stomach. The tape began with the voice of a little girl, almost certainly Emily, crying softly. She whispered, "Mommy says don't tell Daddy." Then, after a pause, she said, "The lady in the wall comes out at night." Daniel sat frozen. A few seconds later, Emily's voice returned, trembling even more. "She wears Mommy's face, but it's not Mommy." Then something heavy crashed in the background, and after that came the voice of an adult woman, low and emotionless, saying, "Emily, come out from under the bed." There was no warmth in that voice, no maternal comfort. It sounded like something pretending to be human. The tape ended with Emily screaming.